Hello everyone. Today I would like to talk about a couple of features of Windows 10 that change the way that we interact with the system. The first one is Windows Search. Now Windows Search is this box down here. If let's stop Cortana before she gets started. If I want to search for something on my computer or on the web even, I can put in a search term here, whether it's typing it in or if you're using Cortana, speak it in and have it translate your speech to text, and then check to see if it can find whatever it is you're looking for. So there are a few places in the system that are what we call indexed. In other words, they've been pre-searched. Windows will periodically go through places that are determined to be the most common places that people will look, and it will index the contents of those areas, things like user folders, profiles, stuff like that. And then it stores it into an index file. This index file is much faster at accessing the names of the files than it is if you're actually searching through the files every time you type in a search term. So we can, by changing where the indexing takes place or what is being indexed, we can speed up this search. And we can also determine what we don't want searched. There may be some folders that are like, yeah, don't bother with that. That's just a pile of old, old movies, and I don't want that searched. And so that way it'll ignore that when it's going through indexing and searching. So let's see how to do that. First, if we go to the Start menu and then go to Settings. In Settings, up here, if we start typing index, indexing options comes up. So this is where we want to be. So as you can see, I have about 1,600 items indexed right now. And the locations that are included are right here. Offline files, Start menu, users, in other words, all of the users of the machine and the files inside the users folder, including our documents, our profile folders, things like that. Notice also we have the ability to exclude certain files. So the hidden folder app data is excluded from this search. Okay? So these are what are being indexed right now. If I want to change that, I can go down here to Modify, click on that, and then now I get to choose through whatever the available volumes and folders are. I can come in here and specify which folders I want to include or exclude from an index. So say I want my program files to be included. So I'm going to check both of the program files folders, and I will say OK. So if I do that, what's going to happen is when the next indexing starts, there we go, it just took a second, it is going to now include all the program files folders as well. So if I'm searching for a specific program, I'll know where it is almost immediately if it is on the system. And now notice my indexed items is going up as the indexing is scanning through these two folders and finding a bunch of different files. Okay, so if I want, let me go back to Modify for a second. If I want to show all locations, what this does, see, I actually can technically see everything now, but showing all locations will include specific user folders. Do you see how up here I can, at this point, if I choose, I can deselect certain users. Like maybe I really don't want to look through Bob's folders. So I'm going to uncheck him here. And now I will not index any files or folders that are on Bob's profile, that are inside Bob's profile. Okay, so okay there. And then it'll go through and it'll probably remove a few files as it finds out, just as soon as I say it, as it finds out that I don't want to see any of Bob's files. Okay, so that's it for modifying. Now, if we go over to Advanced, the Advanced tab here, we have a couple of other settings. Here, we have the ability, as it says here, to index encrypted files. That's pretty cool because normally encrypted files are not readable by anyone other than the user, right? Well, that's true here. The system doesn't look inside the encrypted files to see what's there unless you tell it to. If I tell it to start looking inside, yeah, I know. It's going to be mad that it can't verify my security if I do this. If I allow this, Windows will actually look inside files. And when I say inside files, I mean it'll look inside the text of files that I have stored. This includes now encrypted files that I've stored. So let me uncheck that because that's not necessarily a good thing. But I could do this if I had a bunch of encrypted files that I needed to be able to search. if we have trouble, because sometimes this happens, sometimes you know something is there and you're searching and you can't see it, you may rebuild the index. This will go starting from scratch and scan through the entire area that you have selected back over here on the indexing options, and then recreate an index file. This tells us where our index file is located. If I were to go into Program Data and Microsoft inside this folder, I would see an index. Now, the index itself is kind of unreadable at this point, but you are able to actually recover it, which also this allows you to back it up. It allows you to change locations for where it's stored if you don't want it on your C drive. Just, some flexibility in what you can do with it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is this idea of file types. File types, these are the file types that will be indexed. Now, say you don't want any, images indexed. You just want like documents, text files. There are a ton of these 3G2, 3GP, 3G2P2. These are all movie files, types of movie files. AIF, AIFF, these are, as you can see from the little logo here, these are sound files. And we can decide any of these extensions to not check them, to not have them indexed, to exclude them from our overall search. But notice we also have, where'd it go? Oops. There we go. DocX files, which are Microsoft Office or WordPad documents. So we get to decide which ones of these extensions we want it to index. And if, for example, you have some other program that has a custom extension, you may add that extension to the list just by typing in the extension, giving it a little description, and then you can decide whether you want to include or exclude that extension as well. So some cool stuff. So anyway, this is indexing. This is what Windows uses when it does its search. Now, I do want to point out, let me just close this down and take a look at searching here. If I search for something that maybe doesn't exist on my computer, I have 3 places I can search: applications, documents, and the web. I can actually search the web from right here. So say I want to search for penguins. So there, I'll search for penguins. And it goes on the web and actually looks for things like, well, maybe the Pittsburgh Penguins, what that was I was looking for. There, I think that's more what I was looking for. So it will go out to the web to find things if it cannot find things on the computer. Actually, that's not quite true. Even if you find things on the computer, it will also go to the web and search for things there. You can choose filters. So if I click over here, these are things I can say. I can decide I want to filter all the results by documents, which, as you can see, I have no penguins on my computer at this time, right? So this allows us to then break down whatever large group of results we get into something more manageable and useful to us. So, okay, so that is searching, or more specifically, Windows searching. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, the other feature, is Internet options. Now, Microsoft is trying to move everyone on to Microsoft Edge, which is fine. But most businesses at this point still use Internet Explorer for a great many things. Internet Explorer has a lot of web applications that rely on it. And so at this point and in the near future, we're going to be stuck with Internet Explorer for a while. So Internet options, first of all, is not just Internet Explorer. It covers many different options with browsing the internet. So to get there, it's one of the control panels that we have. So if we go down here to Control Panel, and then Network and Internet, and then Internet Options. Here we go. There is a number of tabs here on the Internet Properties, which is the Internet Options page. So let's just go over a couple of them in brief, and I'll talk about a few more of them in a little more detail. Here on the home page, the main general page, we are able to set our home page. This is the default home page, but say I want to start at Google for whatever reason. Maybe because I really don't like Bing and I want to search, somewhere useful. Okay, so I do that, I hit apply, and now if I open up a web browser, let's open up Bing over here, it is going to not do anything. That's a shame. If I were open up, if I were to go and open up Internet Explorer, for example, Internet Explorer, there we go, it's going to take me to Google because that's where I set it. Now, remember, Internet Explorer, oh, I need to do the whole thing over again. All right. We're going to keep it all on the same thing, though. We're just going to do some cutting. And we'll start at 10:30. Edit it and post. So the other thing I wanted to mention, the other tool, make that 10:45. Oh God. So the other feature I wanted to mention with Windows 10 is Internet options. Now, Microsoft has been trying for quite a while to get everyone to switch over to Edge. Now, and there's nothing wrong with Edge, it's a fine browser, but a lot of companies, a lot of businesses have a lot of applications that rely on Internet Explorer. So Internet Explorer isn't going away anytime soon. And Internet Explorer has this control panel called Internet Options that gives you a lot of flexibility and security settings for using Internet Explorer. So it's going to be around for a while, so I want to talk about the Internet Options. So if we go down to Start Menu and get to our control panel, and in here, Network and Internet, and then Internet Options, the Internet Properties window comes up. There's a lot of tabs here, and there's a lot of different things we can deal with, we can adjust. And so I'm going to go through some of the tabs briefly, and then some in a little more detail. First of all, we've got the General tab, which lists some of the general things that you're going to want to be concerned with when you're using Internet Explorer. One of the things is a homepage. Now, I have changed my homepage to google.com. What that means is when I start Internet Explorer, this is not true for Bing. This is not true for Edge, but it is true for Internet Explorer. When I start Internet Explorer, it brings me to Google first. Now, I can change this if I want. Maybe I want this to go to MATC's website. matc.edu, hit apply, close Internet Explorer, and then if I open it up again, it should be now MATC is my homepage. Okay, most of you may already know this, but if you've never done it before or have never felt bothered to do it before, that's how it gets done. Now, there's a couple of things around here I won't deal with, but browsing history is one that people ask about a lot. Browsing history, this keeps track. This is a history of all the things you've done while on your internet, on Internet Explorer. So, many people want to delete their browsing history, whether it's because they don't want other people seeing what they're doing, or they don't want just a history of where they've been. They don't want other websites being able to grab that data, which is actually sadly a possibility. So you have the option here of just simply hitting delete, and if I do that, it'll say, what do you want to delete? It'll give me a list of stuff that I would like to delete. Now these are the things that Internet Explorer keeps track of and saves for a set amount of time, usually about 30 days. So websites, favorites. So if you have a website that you have bookmarked that's set as a favorite, it keeps some of that data. So when you go back to those websites, it's much faster. It stores small images, it stores cookies, it stores information that allow the web pages to just pop right up. So it feels very immediate. Temporary internet files. As you search the web, as you go along throughout the day, maybe you've hit a web page a couple of times. Every time you come back to it, it doesn't reload the page from scratch. It goes in here, looks for the temporary files, and then grabs them and uses them for a web page, which is why you'll sometimes hear people say, well, try refreshing that page, see if it's changed. When you hit refresh, it actually goes to the web server and downloads a brand new copy of the page, sometimes meaning these files are out of date, and when you refresh it, you get a whole new set of files, which might be the new page that you were expecting to see. Now, cookies, I could spend a whole lecture talking about cookies and what they do and how they're useful and how they're maybe a little dangerous. Either way, if you have cookies disabled, if you never use them, there are many things that you're going to miss out on the modern internet. So they are important to a point, but they also store information about you and about what you have done on the internet, which may not be what you want. So these are all the things that they assume you want deleted. You may delete other things as well, like, for example, passwords. If for some reason you have a password that got saved and you don't want that, add that to the list and it'll delete all the passwords. Form data. You know how when you start typing your name into Amazon, it seems to know exactly who you are, what your address is, and maybe even what your credit card information is? Yeah, that's form data. If you check that and delete it, all of that data goes away. So these are just, and download history is pretty self-explanatory. Tracking protection, all of this stuff is information that websites are not supposed to be tracking or downloading or accessing. So if you do this, you basically delete all information about that website, about you, about your decisions and everything from your computer. This does not, sadly, have anything to do with their computer and what they have stored. So if I delete all this stuff, I click delete, and then now I have essentially, there we go, removed all of my history online from this computer. Now, I can set how I want it to handle it if I don't want to have to do this every time I'm done browsing the internet. So I can say how much space I want it to take up. I can say how long, when I want them to reload internet files. I can go here, history, say how many days I should keep my pages that I have visited in history. And over here, caches and database, this allows me to store website information directly on my computer, whether or not I want to. Right now it's set to allow. So you can play around with this if you want and get a sense for what happens when you change some of these, when you remove some of them. You'll notice the more secure you get, the slower your internet is going to be, the longer it will take to load pages and things like that. Okay, so that would be browsing history. Appearance is quite literally what your browser is going to look like, colors and fonts and that kind of thing. Now, security, this is one I want to mention in a little more detail, maybe not more than browsing history, but I want to talk about what this is. These are 4 different zones that Internet Explorer allows you to use to set certain websites in that give certain levels of security by default. Now, so the internet, this is the default general all pages that you will access, has medium-high settings. This is kind of bothering me. I'm going to get rid of MATC. Sorry, MATC. Medium-high is appropriate for most websites, like it says. This basically, before websites try and do things, before it tries and makes changes or stores data or access data, it's going to ask you before it does it. But it will let some basic internet protocols and small web apps and cookies and things like that run, which is pretty safe for most internet. You may always make it more secure or less secure. There's also a custom level. If you click on this, you're going to get a whole slew of options of rather technical things that you may do to enable or disable, or prompts to run on your typical internet browsing session. So there's a lot of things here, and honestly, most of them are very specific to certain kinds of web applications and things like that. Usually, leaving this at its default setting is fine. Now, the local intranet, the next one over, this is your personal interior network. If you have a web server in your company or in your home, I suppose, if that's the kind of thing you do, you may set different settings for stuff that are inside your business, because generally you trust what's inside because it's yours and you're the one dealing with it. You're the one creating it. You're the one creating the content and managing it. So it's okay. And that is separate from the internet, the big bad wide world out there. Intranet is the stuff that's inside your local network. And this functions the same way with security levels and things like that. Trusted sites is basically an exceptions list. This is if you have sites out in the internet that you visit a lot and you need more access, less security, however you want to put it, you may add these sites into trusted sites. You click on the sites. I don't have any listed here yet. I can add one, and then when I add it, I can specify what the actual security for this is. A lot of times, if you have a partner out on the internet, maybe you have some payroll company that has a web page that manages all your data. It's got a small application that has to run, and it needs more access than the typical internet does. You would put that company's website in your trusted sites, and then you would adjust the settings to make sure that you can run the applications that you need to over the internet. Now, the last one is restricted sites. This essentially says these are sites that have to have more security. And sometimes you can totally shut down anything that a web page could do by simply not allowing it to do anything. Blocking a site actually probably works better for that. But maybe you don't want to completely block someone from being able to get to a site, but you want to make sure that nothing happens, like no cookies are being set or nothing is being downloaded or things like that. And so basically we have internet, intranet, and restricted sites for three different types of security. And then trusted sites are essentially exceptions for the internet where they have their own level of security, but they're not something that are local and they're not something you want to completely block. Okay? So that's security. Now, the rest of these are fairly self-explanatory with a couple of small exceptions. Now, privacy, okay. Different privacy settings, pop-up blocker, as I'm sure you're all aware, this pop-up blocker works all right, but often lets pop-ups through anyway. You may change the settings and never let pop-ups in, which frankly I recommend. So here, let's just do that. Now the downside is if you use web pages that use pop-ups a lot, or you have forms that pop up and things like that, you may have to allow sites. Again, this would be like a trusted site over on the security tab. You would add that in, allow them to give you pop-ups, and then be on your way. There we go. Now, as far as settings go, we have a couple of ways that we can interact with cookies here in the advanced settings. We may accept or not accept or prompt for cookies. Now, first-party cookies versus third-party cookies. The difference. First-party cookies are small pieces of data that are set by the website that you have visited. So I go to google.com. Google sets a cookie. That's a first-party cookie. Third-party cookies are cookies that are sent or that are basically deposited by companies that accessed your computer through Google. So advertisers, for example. So Google's website comes up. There's some ads on the corner. Those ads, if they try and set cookies on your browser or in your browser, that is a third-party cookie. Very often, people don't want third-party cookies. You did not go to Google in order to get a cookie from Mazda or whoever is advertising stuff at the time. So people often will treat these differently. Now, as far as sites go, again, you can create a whitelist here. You can specify, or a blacklist. You can specify which websites can always or never allow cookies. And again, just like the other security settings, you determine which sites they are, you determine whether you're going to allow them or block them, and then they're set. Okay? Now, content, we will not go into certificates. This is something for a later class. I believe the server class talks about certificates. Certificates are ways to assure that you are accessing the data and or the sites that you are intending to. That's a really brief and not very complete description. Autocomplete is, you know how you have a form and you start typing the form and then it decides, oh, based on what you had typed before, this is what you want. Or if you're typing up in the search bar for something, you type in GO and it goes, oh, you want Google. And so it fills it in for you. That's autocomplete. That's because it's taken a list of all the things that you've typed in before and keeps track of them. And in here, you can decide how you can autocomplete, like for forms, like I was talking, for the address bar and things like that. And you may completely delete it. You may stop all of the autocomplete to basically not track what you're typing, things like that. Okay, so the last few, connections. This is if you have a specific way you need to access the internet. Sometimes companies require you to use a VPN or some other way to connect to their internal website so you can log in and do work. And this is one of the ways that you would set that up. Programs, mostly what I want to talk about here are managing add-ons. Internet programs are programs that use the internet for things within their program, like for accessing searches and stuff. File associations allow you to open Internet Explorer by default when you double-click on certain files. Add-ons, though, these are things that are installed to your browser in order to improve or increase the productivity of the browser. The downside is you can get a lot of, basically viruses this way as well. Or if not viruses, just malware, some sort of spam, or my favorite was a coupon add-on from a number of years ago that would constantly infect people, but they wanted those coupons because they wanted their $1 off at Starbucks or whatever. So here's where you can see the ones that are installed. Right now, I should pretty much just have Microsoft ones. So XML DOM, Shockwave, these are all basic extensions for Internet Explorer. Search provider, just Bing. Accelerators, this is all Microsoft stuff. Accelerators are basically things that will see a certain kind of category like email or something and know that whenever you start searching for it, it's just going to automatically open up these locations to access the data. And then tracking protection I had mentioned earlier. This is kind of like a do not call list, if you will, for the internet. This stops places from tracking your location and your history when you're accessing those sites. So there are many times where you will be told, well, try disabling your add-ons if you're having trouble with Internet Explorer crashing or something like that. Or if for some reason you think there's something funny going on with one of those add-ons, you can just come in here and disable them. See how they're enabled now. I would have to select an add-on and then I have the option to disable them. Okay? So that's add-ons and programs in general. Now advanced, this last one, I'm just going to say, if you need to get hair and you know what you're doing, fine. Otherwise, don't touch this. This is quite literally advanced internet settings for certain types of websites and data. And if something weird happened, you may reset everything back to the default state. And I'll leave it at that. So that was Internet Properties. Those are a bunch of different ways that you can configure Internet Explorer. Now, I will just say, let me briefly bring up Edge here. Edge has a whole different set of settings. Over here in the upper right corner, you've got a lot of different things that you can do. Here are the settings to access for Edge. And they have a lot of the same settings. It just looks different, basically. And then they have a lot of the same things you can do in different places. And here you can see we have advanced settings, in which case we have more stuff about where'd I go? Sites for apps that we were just talking about, and that kind of thing. So you feel free to explore Edge as you wish. I'm not going to go into much detail about these because Microsoft walks you through many of the default settings for Edge when you first start. It configures a lot of settings when you first install the system. Okay? All right, so that's it for Internet options and for Windows search.